Welcome to the Thinking Lecture on the power of thoughtfulness. We're going to talk about 5 characteristics that thoughtful leaders have. The first is that thoughtful leaders identify false choices, which means they avoid either or thinking. Instead, they consider both and situations. For example, if you're a sports fan and if someone asks, does the offense or the defense win the game? Well, the answer would be both. They work in concert, and a thoughtful leader is oftentimes thinking about both and how to put sometimes disparate things together. A thoughtful leader is also unconsciously competent. So that means that they don't have to think about how to be a competent leader. Leading is automatic. Now, maybe that comes from the trait theory of leadership, where they were just born leaders, or maybe that comes from the learnable relational process of leadership, where they learned to be a good leader over time. Now, there are several other categories within the unconscious and the conscious in competence and competence. So just rock with me. I know it sounds very confusing, but ultimately it's really very simple. So, unconsciously competent means that leading is automatic. If you are unconsciously incompetent, that means that you don't know what you don't know, and you're unknowingly making mistakes. I call those unknown unknowns. If you're consciously incompetent, that means that you're aware of what you don't know, and those are known unknowns. If you are consciously competent, that means you apply what you do know and you think consciously about it, the known unknowns. So I'd like to show you now a really silly clip from the Boondocks that also helps break down these categories.
The absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence.
What?
Simply because you don't have evidence that something does exist does not mean that you have evidence that something doesn't exist.
What?
What country you from?
What?
What ain't no country I ever heard of. They speak English in what?
What?
English. Do you speak it?
Yeah.
So you understand the words I'm saying to you?
Yeah.
Well, what I'm saying is that there are known knowns and that there are known unknowns, but there's also unknown unknowns. Things we don't know that we don't know.
What?
Say what again? Say what again? I dare you. I double dare you. Say what one more time?
What?
So hopefully that helps you clarify it just a little bit. What else do we know about thoughtful leaders? Thoughtful leaders can live with doubt and uncertainty. Doubt is not a dirty word. None of us really love doubt, but to be a thoughtful leader, sometimes it has to be okay when you don't know, or you know that you don't know. See the battleship example in your textbook. It's a really good example of the importance of embracing doubt. Certainty is only a benefit when the course set is the correct one, and oftentimes it's very, very difficult to know which is the correct path. Thoughtful leaders also embrace a systems orientation. A systems orientation means that everything is connected. So here's a visual to show you the tools of a system thinker. System thinkers see interconnectedness instead of disconnectedness. Instead of thinking things as moving in a linear process from A to B, a system thinker looks at the circular process, again, how everything is connected and not separate. Instead of seeing things in silos, a system thinker embraces emergence, where everything, you can see the little dots in the image, are bouncing off of each other and influencing each other. A system thinker doesn't think in terms of parts. Instead, a system thinker considers how those parts merge together. When a system thinker is doing analysis, again, things aren't in separate circles, but everything is included in one circle. For a systems thinker, nothing exists in isolation. Everything is relational and interconnected. So hopefully all these images are helping you see, again, the aspects of both and that a system thinker needs to embrace. And sometimes you're not going to be entirely sure how things are connected, but as long as you believe they are connected, then you can get to the root of how they are connected. A system thinker believes in holism, meaning the whole is more than the sum of its parts. So if you are leading an organization, that organization has an identity that's more than you as a leader, maybe more than you as the followers, maybe more than you as the customers and clients that you serve. The whole organization is more than the sum of its individual parts. A system thinker knows that there are hierarchies, right? That some things are rated higher than others. Some things must be influenced by other things in order to happen and to function. A system thinker also knows that there are boundaries. There are some things that are within the system, and there are some things that are outside of the system. As a leader, there are some things, some details that you can share with all of your followers, and there are other details that you might just share with your managers. There are some details that you might share with the entire organization, but other details that you wouldn't share with the media or the press. Those are boundaries. Every system also has feedback, which means that a system is calibrated. It shifts and changes based on feedback from the environment. So in your system as a leader, if you get feedback from your followers, you might make shifts in your behavior, right? As a leader, if you get feedback from your customers, you might do shifts in the organization, right? Equifinality is one of my favorite words, and it means that the same goal can be reached in different ways. So if you're a leader and you assign multiple teams the same problem, and the teams come up with different solutions for solving the problem, but the problem still gets solved, that is equifinality. And then finally, there's interdependence. That means, again, that systems are connected. They're interconnected. What happens to one part of the system is going to impact other parts of the system. So to be an effective leader, you have to be a systems thinker and think about these things. And finally, thoughtful leaders ask tough questions. Sometimes those questions are, what are we doing? What did we miss? What else should we be thinking about? How else could we improve? Am I the right leader to lead this organization, institution, group of followers? A leader is not afraid to ask the tough questions. A thinking leader doesn't necessarily have all the answers, but a thinking leader is going to ask the tough questions to get to those answers. And maybe those questions aren't answered by the leader, but they are answered by the leader in collaboration with the leader's followers. Now let's turn our attention to climate. Essentially, climate is how followers feel about the environment that they're collaborating in. So climate is how they feel perhaps about an organization. Climate is an organization's internal environment and how people perceive the nature of the organization's communication practices. When you're asking questions about climate, you might ask a follower, how enthusiastic do you feel about going to work? How trusted do you feel? How much is your input valued in this organization? So a positive organizational climate has supportiveness, where a leader helps to build the personal worth and importance of the followers. A positive climate also has participative decision-making, which means followers feel like they can communicate upwardly. They can share their perceptions with the leader. A positive climate also has trust, that followers believe that the sources of information and the messages they receive about the organization are believable and useful and truthful. A positive climate has openness and candor, meaning leaders can communicate honestly, and employees and team members and other followers can also communicate honestly and share what they're thinking. A positive climate also has high performance goals, so clear communication and understanding and commitment to the organization's objectives, meaning the followers know exactly what's expected of them, and those expectations are set very high by the followers themselves. Now, culture, on the other hand, is the inner reality of that space or the organization where people are collaborating. So if culture measures the thoughts or perceptions people have about the organization, the culture question answers, how do we do it around here? So additional culture questions might be, well, what is this organization's mission? How is decision-making handled? What secrets does the organization have? An organization's culture is wrapped up in the business environment, their history, their values, the heroes, the villains, the rights, and the rituals. An organization's culture directly impacts an organization's climate. How we do it around here will influence how followers feel about the space that they're collaborating in. A leader's leadership style can also impact the culture and climate of an organization. For example, if you're an authoritarian leader and you decide, right, you sell your perception to other people so that you can get what you want as a leader, then you might create a culture where followers know that the leader is in charge and they're just cogs in a wheel, which means in terms of the climate, there might not be a lot of participative decision-making or openness or supportiveness or trust if you're an authoritarian leader. If you are a democratic leader, that means that you distribute responsibilities, right? And if you're distributing these responsibilities, then maybe you encourage your followers to speak up, right? You value your followers and you have a value of open communication, which means your climate might have more high performance goals, trust, openness, and participative decision making. If you are a laissez-faire leader, right, then that means you're hands off. You cede all responsibilities. You tell your followers, well, figure it out, right? And if your followers are always supposed to figure things out, then there might not be a lot of rituals. There might not be a lot of rights in the culture. People just kind of do whatever it is they want to do, which means in the climate, there's probably not going to be a lot of high performance goals. And your followers might feel frustrated if you're a laissez-faire leader because they're waiting for someone to take action. So a selling leader is someone who's usually more authoritarian and they're sort of pushing their ideas off on others. But a consultative leader is someone who's seeking advice and input from others. A consultative leader makes it clear that the decision doesn't just rest in their hands. And a consultative leader is probably someone who's more democratic in their leadership style. There are also Theory X leaders and Theory Y leaders. A Theory X leader believes that most people dislike their work, they need to be directed, they're unmotivated, they're unskilled, and they need to be controlled. So a Theory X leader is someone who is going to rely on close supervision, control, and threats of punishment. A Theory X leader might have a more authoritarian style, and the climate is usually going to be negative under a Theory X leader. A Theory Y leader, on the other hand, believes that most people find work as natural, that they're capable of directing themselves, that followers are creative problem solvers, they should be involved in the decision making, and they have and use self-control. So under a Theory Y leader, communication flows up and down and across, decision-making is distributed throughout, and people of all levels are consulted. There's an open communication and an open door policy, which you can see will lead to a very positive and supportive climate. Here's another visual from your text for thinking about leadership styles, right? So a social leader is someone that is very high in concern for workers and people. They're very relational, but the social leader finds it difficult to get things done, right? They are low on the task aspect. Now, on the flip side, a leader who is a task leader is very good at getting things done, but not very relational. They're low on their concern for workers and people. Ideally, you want to be in the middle as a balanced or a moderate leader that has a high concern for task and a high concern for workers. Transactional and transformative leadership is what we want to move to in an ideal world. A transactional leader is just getting things done. But a transformational leader is able to get things done by having a high concern for people and for their needs. So transactional leadership has a concern for satisfying people's physiological safety and belonging needs first. And once those needs are met, it lays the foundation for meeting their transformational needs of self-esteem and self-actualization. So on the screen here, we have Maslow's hierarchy on the right. So the physiological needs: do people have food, water, and shelter? Do they meet their safety and security needs? Health, employment, property, etc., and then move up the chart. So because I'm a yogi, I have also paired that with the 7 chakras chart, which you can see is very similar, and some of the colors also match as well. But at our root chakra, right, we have those basic needs that we have to be met, and then we can move up to our self-esteem and our higher order needs. Not that it's the leader's responsibility to transform every single one of their followers, but if a leader can meet their followers' basic needs, then they can move towards those self-esteem and self-actualization needs, which means the followers can be more independent, right? And start thinking for themselves and depend less on the leader over time. So one of my favorite quotes from one of my past students is, "Don't have thoughtless thoughts." And I want to remind you that as developing leaders, it's time to think about your thinking. So replace "or thinking" with "and thinking." And here are our reflection questions for this lecture. Do you think when you should feel? Do you feel when you should think? And can you separate the two? This concludes our thinking lecture.